Jacob Hall felt the familiar thrill of power as the pen scratched against the paper. Each stroke a final damning nail in the coffin of his 20-year marriage. He was signing everything the architectural firm he'd built their sprawling Georgetown mansion, the stock portfolio that cushioned their lives, over to Bianca, his vibrant, intoxicating mistress. He imagined his wife Laurie, a ghost in their pristine home, soon to be utterly destitute. He believed he was executing the perfect, ruthless exit. What he didn't know was that he wasn't closing a chapter. He was walking directly into a trap that had been set for him 2 decades ago. A trap sealed not with a kiss, but with an old forgotten signature on a secret contract she kept locked away. The Hall home in Georgetown was a testament to Jacob's success, a symphony of glass, steel, and reclaimed wood that graced the covers of prestigious design magazines. Every line was clean, every surface polished, every room a curated space of cold, minimalist perfection. It was a house built to be admired, not lived in a reflection of the man who created it. And for the past few years, Laurie Hall had felt like just another one of its tasteful silent fixtures. Their life, once a vibrant partnership, had become a hollow echo to Jacob, the celebrated founder of Hall & Associates, a firm that shaped city skylines, was a man consumed by his own reflection. The shared laughter over late-night sketches had been replaced by the solitary tapping of his keyboard. The weekend trips to scour antique shops had morphed into urgent business conferences in cities Laurie never visited. She knew, of course. A wife always knows. It wasn't one single clue, but 1,000 tiny cuts. The scent of a perfume, Jardin de Lune, that she never wore, clinging faintly to his cashmere scarves. The second phone, a sleek burner he thought was so cleverly hidden in his gym bag. The credit card statements for a boutique hotel in Adams Morgan. A place too trendy, too intimate for a business meeting. The other woman's name was Bianca Reed. Laurie had found it on a restaurant receipt, tucked into a coat pocket, a dinner for 2 at Le Diplomate, a place he hadn't taken Laurie in years. A quick, discreet search revealed a woman 20 years his junior, an ambitious interior designer with a predatory smile and an online portfolio filled with sensual, bold designs. She was everything Laurie was not. Where Laurie was classic elegance and quiet strength, Bianca was loud, modern, and dripping with an overt sensuality that Jacob, on the cusp of 50, found intoxicating. Laurie played the part of the oblivious wife with an Oscar-worthy performance. She still greeted him at the door with a practiced smile, still asked about his day, feigning interest in the concrete and steel that had stolen her husband. She watched him preen in the mirror, his new tighter shirts stretching across a frame maintained by a punishing new fitness regimen. He was a cliché, a man desperately trying to outrun his own age, and Bianca was his finish line. The charade was exhausting. Her sister Sophie Miller was her only confidant. "Why do you let him get away with it?" Sophie would demand during their hushed phone calls. "Confront him, burn his expensive suits, don't just sit there and let him humiliate you." "Patience, Soph," Laurie would reply, her voice a calm sea over a turbulent ocean of emotion. "A controlled demolition requires careful planning. You can't just light a match and walk away. You have to place the charges in exactly the right spots." Sophie never fully understood. She saw a doormat. She didn't see the strategist. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening. Jacob arrived home unusually late, smelling of champagne and that damnable perfume. He strode into the kitchen where Laurie was arranging flowers, his face flush with a cruel sort of glee. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Laurie, we need to talk," he announced, his tone dripping with false solemnity. She turned slowly, placing a white rose into the vase. "Oh," It must be important. You haven't wanted to talk in years, Jacob. He ignored the barb, pulling a thick manila envelope from his briefcase and slapping it onto the cold white marble of the kitchen island. The sound echoed in the cavernous room. "I'm leaving you," he said, the words sharp and final. "I've filed for divorce. These are the papers. My lawyer, Robert Pike, will be in touch with yours." Laurie looked at the envelope, then back at his face. She allowed a flicker of practiced vulnerability to cross her features. "After 20 years, just like that, it hasn't been a marriage for a long time," he sneered, puffing out his chest. "I'm in love with someone else. Her name is Bianca Reed. We're going to be married." "Bianca?" Laurie repeated the name softly, as if tasting it for the first time. "The interior designer. I've seen her work. Very bold." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "What do you know about her?" "A husband's secrets are rarely as secret as he thinks," she replied, her voice still quiet. She made no move to touch the envelope. "What's in there, Jacob?" "The terms of my surrender." His smirk returned wider and more arrogant this time. "The terms of your new reality. The house is mine. The firm is mine. The assets are mine. I built this life, Laurie. You just lived in it. I'll give you a one-time settlement. Enough for you to find a small apartment somewhere quiet. It's more than generous, considering you haven't worked a day since we were married. The dismissal, the erasure of 20 years of her life, the dinner parties she hosted to charm his clients, the financial plans she helped him draft in the early days, the emotional scaffolding she provided that allowed him to build his empire. It was a breathtaking act of cruelty. He truly saw her as nothing more than a decoration. She held his gaze, letting the silence stretch. For a moment she allowed the mask to slip, letting him see a sliver of the ice in her veins. "Is that all, Jacob?" He was taken aback by her lack of hysteria. He had expected tears, pleading, screaming. Her composure was unsettling. "Yes," he said, his voice losing some of its bluster. "That's all." "Then I think you should leave," she said, turning back to her flowers. "This is still my home, until a judge says otherwise." He scoffed, grabbing his briefcase. "Enjoy it while you can. The locks will be changed by the end of the week." As he walked out, slamming the front door behind him, Laurie didn't flinch. She carefully snipped the stem of another rose and placed it in the vase. The arrangement was perfect. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. She walked over to the marble island, picked up the thick envelope, and dropped it unopened into the kitchen trash. She didn't need to read it. She already knew what her next move was. It was a move she had prepared for 20 years ago. Jacob Hall felt reborn. Leaving Laurie was like shedding a heavy, outdated coat. In its place was Bianca Reed, a woman who was not a quiet accessory to his life, but the main event. She was a vibrant slash of color in his monochrome world, her laughter echoing through the halls of the Georgetown house that she was already mentally redecorating. "We have to get rid of all this beige," Bianca declared, running a perfectly manicured hand over a suede wall panel in the living room. "It's so funereal. I'm thinking jewel tones, emerald green, sapphire blue, and gold accents. Lots of gold." Jacob watched her mesmerized. She wasn't just his lover. She was his muse, his validation. She made him feel young, powerful, desired. "Whatever you want, my love," he said, pulling her close. "This house is yours to transform." His lawyer, Robert Pike, a man with a jaw as square as his legal ethics, had been clear. "The divorce will be messy if she fights," Pike had warned. Laurie was there from the beginning, A judge might see her as an integral part of your success. She was a history major who became a housewife, Jacob had scoffed. She arranged flowers and planned dinner parties. The firm, the money, that was all me. Perception is everything, Jacob. We need to insulate your assets. Protect what's yours before she can even think about touching it. It was Bianca who came up with the brilliant solution. They were sitting in a ridiculously expensive restaurant, the kind where the water menu is longer than the wine list. "Darling," she began, leaning forward, her voice a seductive whisper. "What if there was nothing for her to take? What if on paper you had very little?" Jacob was intrigued. "Go on. What if you transferred the majority ownership of the firm to me?" She purred, her eyes gleaming. "And the deed to the house, and the main investment accounts. We put them in my name, or in a new trust that only I control. For now. Legally, they become my assets. When her lawyers come sniffing around, the cupboards will be bare. She can't claim what you no longer own. It's a temporary measure, a strategic move." Jacob looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was audacious. It was ruthless. It was perfect. It was a masterstroke of offensive strategy, ensuring Laurie would be left with scraps from a table he had already cleared. "Bianca," he said, taking her hand, "you are a genius." Over the next 2 weeks, Jacob and Pike worked furiously. A series of complex legal documents were drawn up. Jacob, blinded by infatuation and his own arrogance, saw it as a brilliant legal maneuver. He was moving his king to safety before the battle even began. He didn't realize he was handing his crown to the opposing queen. The signing took place in Pike's polished mahogany office overlooking the Potomac. The pile of documents was immense. There was the transfer of 85% of the shares of Hall and Associates to a holding company owned solely by Bianca Reed. There was the quitclaim deed for the Georgetown mansion, signing it over to her free and clear. There were the papers liquidating his personal portfolio and transferring the funds to a new account under her name. Pike, for all his bluster, felt a professional flicker of unease. "Jacob, this is extreme. You're leaving yourself incredibly vulnerable." "Are you absolutely certain?" "I'm certain I'm not letting that woman get half of what I've spent my life building," Jacob snapped. "Bianca and I are a team. This protects us." Bianca, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand. She wore a stunning white dress, looking every bit the blushing bride-to-be. She gave him a look of such profound love and gratitude that it extinguished any lingering doubt in his mind. He picked up the heavy gold-plated pen. One by one, he signed the papers. With each signature, he felt a weight lift. He was building an impenetrable fortress around his future, around his life with Bianca. The ink flowed black and final. He was signing away his past to secure his future. "It's done," he said, leaning back in the leather chair, a wave of triumph washing over him. He had outsmarted Laurie. He had outsmarted the entire legal system. He was invincible. Bianca leaned over and kissed him a long, lingering kiss that tasted of victory. "Now nothing can touch us, darling," she whispered. That evening they celebrated with a bottle of champagne that cost more than a month's rent on the kind of apartment he'd designated for Laurie. They toasted to their future, to their brilliance, to their love. "To the new era," Jacob said, raising his glass. "The Hall Reed era." "I like the sound of that," Bianca said, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond. As Jacob fell asleep that night, cocooned in the certainty of his own genius, he pictured Laurie's face when her lawyer delivered the news. The shock, the despair, the utter helplessness. He imagined her in a small, sad apartment, surrounded by the ruins of her life, while he and Bianca ascended to ever greater heights. The thought gave him a deep, satisfying sense of peace. He had won. The game was over. With the ink on the transfer documents barely dry, Bianca Reed's transformation was immediate and absolute. She was no longer just the mistress, the other woman hiding in the shadows. She was the matriarch in waiting, and she began to act the part with a voracious and unapologetic zeal. Her first order of business was the house. The quiet, elegant world Laurie had curated was dismantled piece by piece. The neutral-toned silk rugs were rolled up and replaced with bold, abstract monstrosities. The understated landscape paintings were taken down, leaving ghostly rectangles on the walls, soon to be covered in garish metallic wallpaper. Contractors swarmed the property, their trucks churning up the manicured lawn. Bianca directed them with the air of a conquering general, pointing and gesturing her voice, sharp and decisive. "This entire wall needs to go," she announced in the master suite, waving a dismissive hand at the custom-built mahogany bookshelf. "I need a dressing room. Think Rodeo Drive boutique, marble mirrors and a champagne fridge." Jacob, besotted, agreed to everything. He saw her decisiveness not as greed, but as passion. Her extravagance was not a warning sign, but a celebration of their new life. He was funding her vision, and in doing so he felt he was co-authoring their glorious future. She took to her new position as majority shareholder of Hall & Associates with equal gusto. She didn't understand the intricacies of structural engineering or urban planning, but she understood power. She had a new office, Jacob's old corner office, redecorated in white leather and chrome. She would sweep into the firm in the late morning, dressed in designer outfits that cost more than a junior architect's monthly salary, and conduct reviews. She would walk through the studio peering at complex blueprints and 3D models. "The lines on this building are too severe," she'd pronounce, tapping a long crimson nail on a design that had taken a team of architects months to perfect. "It needs more glamour. Add a water feature, and maybe some gold leaf on the facade." The senior partners' men who had worked with Jacob for decades were aghast. They tried to reason with him in hushed, urgent meetings. "Jacob, she's compromising the integrity of the firm's designs," said Frank Gerber, his oldest colleague. "We're architects, not Vegas hotel decorators. Our reputation is on the line." "Bianca has a fresh eye," Jacob would retort, his defensiveness growing with each complaint. "She's bringing a new energy to the brand. You're all just stuck in the past. It's time for a change." His loyalty to Bianca was absolute, creating a toxic, impenetrable shield around her. Employees began to whisper in the hallways. Morale plummeted. Frank Gerber, after one particularly galling meeting where Bianca suggested adding a diamond dust-infused finish to the concrete of a new museum, quietly began updating his resume. Bianca's personal spending was astronomical. She had a black American Express card with no limit, and she used it as a weapon. Shopping sprees on Fifth Avenue, a new Maserati, a weekend trip to Monaco on a private jet. Just to get some sun. She documented it all on social media, with a smug satisfaction, posting photos of herself dripping in new jewels, always with Jacob by her side, his arm wrapped possessively around her. Each post was a carefully crafted missile aimed directly at Laurie. One afternoon, Bianca was in the Georgetown house, now a chaotic construction zone, when her phone rang. It was one of her girlfriends, Tiffany. "Oh my God! I saw your latest post from the jet. You are living the dream," Tiffany squealed. "It's not bad," Bianca said, leaning against a dust-covered wall, a smirk playing on her lips. Jacob is just so generous. He adores me. And the old wife? Have you heard anything? Laurie. Not a peep. Apparently her lawyer received the divorce filing and the settlement offer. It was a pittance. Pike said they haven't even responded yet. She's probably in shock, poor thing. Trying to figure out how to live on a budget for the first time in her life. God, you're brutal. I love it, Tiffany laughed. You really pulled it off. You have everything. Everything and then some, Bianca agreed. The firm is practically mine. The house is mine. He's so terrified she'll get a piece of him that he's handed it all to me for safekeeping. It's the most romantic thing a man has ever done for me. She hung up the phone, a deep sense of satisfaction settling over her. She looked around at the half-demolished room. She was erasing Laurie from this house, from Jacob's life, from history itself. She had won. It was an unconditional surrender. She was queen of a new empire, and Jacob was her willing, adoring subject. The idea that she was merely a placeholder, a temporary guardian of assets that would soon be ripped from her grasp, never once crossed her mind. In her world, the game was over. The throne was secure, and the future was paved with gold. While Bianca was loudly redecorating her new kingdom, Laurie Hall was quietly preparing for war. Her base of operations was not a disheveled apartment as Jacob imagined, but her sister Sophie's elegant brownstone in DuPont Circle. The guest room had been converted into a command center. The bed was neatly made, but the large oak desk was covered in neat stacks of documents, financial statements and legal pads filled with her precise, elegant handwriting. Laurie wasn't in shock. She was focused. The past few years of Jacob's emotional abandonment had been a painful but effective training ground, forging her sorrow into a core of pure, cold resolve. Her first call the day after Jacob had slammed the door on their marriage was not to a divorce lawyer. It was to Ms. Audrey Chen, a partner at a boutique law firm specializing in corporate and contract law. Audrey was a formidable woman in her early 50s with razor-sharp intelligence and a reputation for surgically dismantling the cases of her opponents. They had met years ago on a charity board, and Laurie had been impressed by her no-nonsense demeanor. They met in Audrey's minimalist office, a space as clean and precise as her legal arguments. Laurie was the picture of composure, dressed in a simple navy blue dress, her demeanor calm and collected. He thinks I'm going to hire some bulldog divorce attorney and fight over the furniture. Laurie began setting her leather satchel on the table. He's prepared for that. He's not prepared for this. From her satchel, she produced a single leather-bound folder. It was old, the leather worn smooth at the edges. She slid it across the glass table to Audrey. Audrey opened it. Inside was a document, yellowed with age, dated 21 years ago, 6 months before Laurie and Jacob were married. The title at the top read Founding Partner Agreement for Hall and Associates. Audrey's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. She began to read. The story was laid out in the precise legal language of the document, but Laurie narrated the human element. My father died when I was 24. She explained, her voice even. He left me a significant inheritance. Not a fortune, but substantial. Jacob at the time was brilliant and ambitious, but he was working for a large, soulless firm that stifled his creativity. He had a dream of starting his own company, but he had no capital. Laurie had seen his potential. She believed in his vision. But she was also her father's daughter, a pragmatic, shrewd businessman who had taught her to never let sentiment cloud a sound financial decision. I gave him the seed money, she continued. $250,000. It was everything I had. In exchange, I didn't want to be a lender. I wanted to be a partner, a silent partner. I drafted this agreement with my father's old lawyer. It made me a 40% equity partner in the yet-to-be-formed Hall & Associates. Audrey nodded her eyes, scanning the clauses. Standard silent partner agreement, equity stake share of profits. Then she stopped. Her finger rested on clause 12B. Ah, she said softly. Here it is. Clause 12B. The infidelity and dissolution clause. It was an unusual addition to a business partnership agreement, but one Laurie's lawyer had insisted upon. It stated that if the business relationship was ever compromised by a dissolution of their future marriage, and if that dissolution was a direct result of proven infidelity on the part of Jacob Hall, Laurie's 40% equity stake would automatically convert to a controlling interest of 60%. He signed it, Audrey murmured, looking at the two signatures at the bottom. Jacob's was a confident, youthful scrawl. Laurie's was neat and deliberate. He barely read it, Laurie said, a flicker of memory in her eyes. He was so excited about the money, about the chance to build his dream. He said it was just a formality. He said we'd be together forever, so a clause like that would never matter. He called it my little piece of paper and tucked it away. This isn't just a piece of paper, Laurie, Audrey said, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across her face. This is a masterpiece. It's a business contract, not a prenuptial agreement. It predates the marriage. Community property laws are irrelevant. This document governs the ownership of the firm. It's ironclad. For the next 2 weeks, they worked. Laurie had been meticulous. She provided Audrey with evidence of Jacob's affair, private investigator reports, copies of the hotel receipts, photos of Jacob and Bianca together. They also tracked Jacob's recent financial activities. The transfer of assets to Bianca wasn't a secret. It was a public record, a trail of breadcrumbs leading directly to his attempt to defraud Laurie in the divorce proceedings. He's made our case for us, Audrey remarked, looking over the transfer deeds. By moving the assets to his mistress, he's not only proven infidelity in the most flagrant way possible, but he's also committed fraudulent conveyance. He's tried to hide marital assets which judges frown upon. But more importantly, he's transferred assets that, according to this agreement, he no longer solely controlled. He gave away a controlling interest in a company that wasn't his to give. Laurie felt a calm, cold certainty settle over her. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the life she had helped build. Jacob had called her a housewife, a decorator, an accessory. He had forgotten who she was at her core, her father's daughter, a strategist who understood that the most powerful moves are the ones your opponent never sees coming. So what's our next step? Laurie asked. Audrey Chen leaned back in her chair, the light glinting off her glasses. We let them believe they're winning. We don't respond to their settlement offer. We let them get comfortable in their new kingdom. And then we schedule a meeting. Not a divorce mediation. A shareholder meeting. And you, as the new majority shareholder of Hall & Associates, will preside. The invitation arrived via a legal courier to Jacob Hall's office. It was addressed to him and to Bianca Reed in her capacity as the current majority shareholder. It was a formal summons to an emergency shareholder and board meeting to be held at the offices of Chen & Associates. The agenda item was listed simply as Review and Ratification of Corporate Governance and Asset Allocation. Jacob read it with a smirk. She's finally making a move, he said, tossing the letter onto Bianca's new white leather desk. Her lawyer must have figured out we moved the assets. This is a desperation tactic. They're going to try and argue the transfer was illegal. Bianca picked up the letter, her brow furrowed. Do we have to go? Pike says we should, Jacob replied confidently. It's better to shut them down in person. We'll go with Pike and listen to their pathetic little argument. Then Pike will tear it to shreds, and we'll be done with this for good. Think of it as a final victory lap. On the day of the meeting, they arrived looking like a power couple from a magazine shoot. Jacob wore a tailored Italian suit, his demeanor radiating arrogance. Bianca was in a sharp crimson dress, her jewelry sparkling under the fluorescent lights of the law firm's lobby. Their lawyer, Robert Pike, strode beside them, carrying a briefcase full of what he believed was an unassailable legal position. They were shown into a large, sterile boardroom. On one side of a long, polished table sat Laurie, looking serene and composed in a simple, elegant grey suit. Beside her was Audrey Chen, her face impassive. The contrast between the two sides was stark. Jacob and Bianca's loud, flashy confidence versus Laurie and Audrey's quiet, formidable stillness. "Laurie," Jacob said with a condescending nod, "this is all a bit dramatic, don't you think? You could have just had your lawyer call mine." Laurie didn't reply, simply gesturing to the empty chairs opposite them. "Please sit." Once they were seated, Audrey Chen began. "Thank you all for coming. We've convened this meeting to address a critical issue regarding the ownership structure of Hall & Associates." Robert Pike cleared his throat, eager to take control. "Ms. Chen, with all due respect, the ownership structure is perfectly clear. My client, Mr. Hall, legally transferred his assets, including his shares in the firm, to Ms. Reed. The paperwork is impeccable. If this is an attempt to claw back assets in a divorce proceeding, this is not a divorce proceeding, Mr. Pike," Audrey interjected, her voice cutting through his bluster like glass. "This is a corporate matter, and you are mistaken. The ownership structure is not at all clear because your client transferred shares he did not have the authority to transfer." A flicker of confusion crossed Jacob's face. "What are you talking about? I founded the company. They were my shares." Audrey slid a file across the table. "Were they Mr. Hall?" Pike opened the file. His eyes widened as he saw the founding partner agreement. He read it quickly, his face paling with each sentence. He stopped at Clause 12b, reading it once, then twice. He looked up, his jaw slack. He looked at Jacob, a silent, furious accusation in his eyes. "You never told me about this. What is it?" Jacob demanded, snatching the paper from his lawyer. He read the clause. The words seemed to swim before his eyes. "If the dissolution of their future marriage is a direct result of proven infidelity on the part of Jacob Hall, Laurie Hall's 40% equity stake will automatically convert to a controlling interest of 60%. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. Jacob's face went from tanned and confident to a sickly ashen grey. He looked at Laurie, truly seeing her for the first time in years, not as the quiet wife, but as the architect of his demise. "This is ridiculous," he stammered, his voice cracking. "This is an old piece of paper. It's not valid." "I assure you, it is 100% valid," Audrey stated calmly. "It is a legally binding business contract that predates your marriage. We have irrefutable proof of your infidelity, which triggers Clause 12b. As of the moment you filed for divorce on the grounds of starting a new life with your mistress, Laurie became the 60% majority shareholder of Hall & Associates." Bianca, who had been watching this exchange with growing panic, finally spoke up. "But he signed it all over to me. The firm, the house, it's all mine." Audrey Chen turned her cool gaze to Bianca. Ms. Reed, you are in possession of nothing. Mr. Hall engaged in fraudulent conveyance by transferring assets he did not have the sole authority to transfer. He gave you 85% of a company in which he only held a 40% non-controlling interest. That transfer is null and void. As for the house and the other liquid assets, they were purchased with profits from the firm, a firm in which Laurie has always held a 40% stake. You will be required to return every single dollar. The reality of the situation crashed down on Jacob like a wrecking ball. He hadn't protected his assets. He had gift-wrapped his entire empire and handed it to the woman he had just discarded. Laurie finally spoke, her voice devoid of triumph, filled only with a chilling finality. You were right about one thing, Jacob. You did build a life. But you seem to have forgotten that I provided the foundation and the funding. I was your silent partner in business and in life. You decided to dissolve that partnership. This is simply the enforcement of our original contract. She rose from her chair. As the majority shareholder, my first order of business is to call for a vote on the leadership of the company. I vote to remove Jacob Hall as CEO and president effective immediately. The motion passes. Jacob sat there stunned into silence, a statue of a broken man. Bianca stared at Laurie, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. The gold-paved future she had so meticulously planned had just evaporated, revealed to be nothing but a fool's dream. The quiet woman in the grey suit held all the cards. She hadn't just won the game. She had owned the entire casino from the very beginning. The silence that followed Laurie's final pronouncement was a living thing, thick and suffocating. For a moment, the only sound in the sterile boardroom was the frantic, shallow breathing of Jacob Hall. The world had tilted on its axis, and he was in a free fall. Robert Pike was the first to move. He slowly closed the file containing the founding partner agreement, the gesture as final as shutting a coffin lid. He leaned over to his client, his voice a furious, sibilant whisper that cut through the tension. A founding partner agreement with an infidelity clause. You brought me into a war and failed to mention the enemy possessed a nuclear weapon. Why, Jacob? Why in God's name would you not disclose this? It was nothing. A piece of paper from 20 years ago. Jacob hissed back, his eyes wild with panic. It was a formality. Formalities like this don't just go away. They're landmines. Pike shoved his chair back, his face flushed with a mixture of professional embarrassment and rage. We have no position, no leverage, nothing. You're not just exposed, Jacob. You're annihilated. The admission of defeat from his own lawyer finally shattered Jacob's denial. A raw, guttural roar tore from his throat. He surged to his feet, his hands slamming down on the polished table, rattling the water glasses. You can't do this. This is my life's work. My name is on that door. You think you can just walk in and take it? He bellowed, his fury directed solely at the calm, immovable figure of his wife. Audrey Chen rose not with aggression, but with an air of clinical finality. Mr. Hall, your name on the door is now merely a historical artifact. As of this meeting, Laurie, as the legally ratified majority shareholder, has terminated your employment. You are no longer CEO. You are no longer an employee. You are for all intents and purposes a trespasser on corporate property. If you attempt to enter the premises, security will be instructed to remove you. The word struck Jacob with the force of a physical blow, and he sank back into his chair, stunned and gasping. The fight was gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed look of utter devastation. It was then that Bianca, who had been frozen in a state of horrified disbelief, finally erupted. Her carefully constructed facade of the sophisticated heiress-in-waiting crumbled into dust, revealing the raw, grasping desperation beneath. "No," he signed it to me. "The firm, the house, the money. It's mine," she shrieked, her voice high and shrill. She turned her venomous gaze on Jacob. "You idiot! You absolute fool! You told me it was perfect. You swore to me there were no loopholes." Then, in a dizzying display of emotional whiplash, her anger dissolved into a desperate, syrupy plea. She turned to Laurie, her features softening into a mask of contrived sisterhood. "Laurie, please," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We don't have to let these men and their papers decide things. You and I, we can work this out, woman to woman. He hurt you, I understand that. But you can't just destroy everything. There must be a settlement we can agree on." Laurie looked at the woman who had helped orchestrate her ruin, now begging for mercy, and felt nothing but a cold, weary disdain. "There is nothing to work out, Ms. Reed," she said, her voice cutting through the cloying appeal. "You were a willing participant in a conspiracy to commit fraud. The only conversation my lawyer will be having with you from now on will be regarding the immediate return of all misappropriated assets." Audrey Chen provided the chilling specifics. "Ms. Reed, the funds Mr. Hall illegally transferred to you were corporate assets you had no legal claim to. We will be filing an injunction this afternoon to freeze every account in your name. Every single dollar. If you have spent any of the money, and your very public social media presence suggests you have spent quite a lot, we will initiate civil proceedings to recover it. As for the Georgetown property, we will be filing a suit to reverse the fraudulent deed transfer. You will be served with eviction papers by the end of the week. I suggest you start packing." The reality finally landed. The Maserati, the couture gowns, the private jet to Monaco. It wasn't a lifestyle. It was a debt. A mountain of debt she now had no way to pay. The blood drained from her face, leaving her makeup standing out in stark, garish relief. Jacob, seeing his last hope evaporating, made one final pathetic appeal. He looked at Laurie, the anger and defiance gone, replaced by the pleading eyes of a broken man. "Laurie, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Think about what you're doing. 20 years, our life together. Doesn't that mean anything? We can talk about this. We can fix this." Laurie held his gaze, letting the full weight of their history hang in the air between them. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember the young, ambitious man she had once loved. The man who had shared her dreams before his reflection became the only thing he could see. "It meant everything to me, Jacob," she said, and her voice was not triumphant, but heavy with the finality of a eulogy. "That's why I'm doing this. You didn't just have an affair. You tried to erase me. You and your associate," she said with a slight nod toward Bianca, "plotted to render our 20 years meaningless and leave me utterly destitute. You saw me as a piece of furniture in your perfect house, an obstacle to be bulldozed so you could build something new. You just didn't realize my foundations were deeper and stronger than yours." She picked up her leather satchel, the same one that had held the contract. "This was never about revenge. It was simply the enforcement of our original agreement. Goodbye, Jacob." She and Audrey turned and walked out of the boardroom, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence. They didn't look back. They left Jacob and Bianca sitting across from each other at the long, polished table, two strangers marooned in the wreckage of their own greed. The demolition was swift and brutal. That very afternoon, Bianca was lounging by the newly installed pool at the Georgetown house, scrolling through photos of a diamond bracelet she intended to buy. She tapped on her banking app to check her balance. A stark red banner flashed across the screen. Account frozen. Contact your financial institution. A cold dread washed over her. She called the bank, and a dispassionate voice informed her that a court-ordered injunction had locked down all her assets, pending a fraud investigation. The line went dead. The diamond bracelet, the house, the life, it all vanished in a single digital blink. 2 days later came the public humiliation. Believing it was a temporary glitch, she swept into a designer boutique gathering armfuls of clothes. At the counter, the sales associate who had once fawned over her swiped her black card. A moment of silence. He swiped it again. A quiet but clear beep echoed through the hushed store. "I'm sorry, Ms. Reed," the associate said, his voice laced with condescending pity. "It's been declined." All eyes in the store turned to her. The burning shame was a physical thing, and she fled, leaving her would-be purchases in a sad pile on the marble counter. That night was the final ugly implosion. She confronted Jacob in the half-renovated living room, surrounded by dust sheets and cans of garish gold paint. "This is all your fault," she screamed, her voice raw with fury. "Your stupidity, your arrogance, you ruined me." "Me?" He roared back, his own despair curdling into rage. "You were the one pushing me. Transfer it all, darling. It's the only way." "You were a parasite, Bianca. You just attached yourself to what you thought was a winning ticket." They tore into each other, hurling every cruel truth and bitter resentment they had harbored. The intoxicating passion they had shared was revealed for what it was, a transaction built on mutual delusion. An hour later, her designer suitcases were packed. She left without a backward glance, leaving Jacob utterly alone in the cavernous, half-destroyed house that was no longer his. The next morning, a process server taped an eviction notice to the grand front door. For Jacob, the fall was total. His professional world, which he had ruled like a king, slammed its gates in his face. Colleagues who had once vied for his attention now didn't return his calls. He was a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. He was forced to sell his car, liquidate what few personal effects he had left, and move into a small, soulless apartment. One cold evening, drawn by a morbid sense of nostalgia, he drove to Georgetown and parked across the street from the house. His house. A warm light spilled from the large windows. The construction debris was gone. He could see figures inside, gathered around the large central table. It was Laurie. She was with Frank Gerber and other senior architects from the firm. They were poring over blueprints, laughing, pointing, debating. There was an energy in the room, a vibrant, collaborative spirit he had never managed to foster. He was watching his own legacy being expertly dismantled and rebuilt into something better, something that had no place for him. He had signed everything over in a blaze of arrogant triumph, thinking he was surgically removing his past. He saw now with devastating clarity that he had only managed to amputate his entire future. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, a small crowd of employees gathered on the sidewalk in front of their downtown office building. A crisp autumn breeze rustled the papers in their hands, but no one seemed to notice the chill. All eyes were fixed upwards on the large, gleaming steel plaque by the main entrance, which was covered by a heavy velvet cloth. The old name, Hall and Associates, had been removed a week prior, leaving a ghostly outline that felt like a scar. Today, that scar was being healed. Laurie stood on the steps, flanked by a beaming Frank Gerber. She wasn't dressed like a corporate titan, but in a simple, elegant auburn dress that mirrored the changing leaves in the nearby park. She looked not like a conqueror, but a confident steward. "I know the last year has been one of profound uncertainty." She began, her voice clear and steady, carrying over the city noise. Reputations were challenged, and morale was tested, but the heart of this firm was never one person's name. It has always been the collective talent, dedication, and creativity within these walls. It was a fire that was dimmed but never extinguished. With a nod from Laurie, Frank pulled a cord. The velvet cloth slid away, revealing the newly etched name, Phoenix Design Group. A murmur of approval went through the crowd, followed by spontaneous, heartfelt applause. The name was perfect. It wasn't just a rebranding. It was a declaration of principle, a symbol of a magnificent rebirth from the ashes of ego and deceit. Phoenix Design Group will be a place of collaboration, not ego. Laurie continued, a genuine smile gracing her lips. A place where great ideas are nurtured, no matter who they come from. And a place where we will not just build structures, but build a legacy of integrity and purpose. Welcome to a new beginning. This was not just rhetoric. In the months that followed, Laurie's leadership proved to be a quiet revolution. She was a constant presence, not locked away in a corner office, but walking the studio floors, learning the names of junior draftsmen and interns. She remembered details about their lives, asked for their opinions, and listened with an intensity that made people feel truly seen. She didn't pretend to be an architect. She celebrated the fact that she wasn't. "My job is to clear the path so that you, the brilliant minds, can create," she often said. She implemented a generous profit-sharing plan, directly linking the company's success to the rewards of every single employee. She established paid sabbaticals for senior staff to travel and find new inspiration. She personally negotiated contracts, bringing a warmth and shrewdness to the table that clients found both charming and formidable. Where Jacob had commanded with bluster, Laurie persuaded with logic and grace. The firm, unshackled from its toxic past, began to land the kind of prestigious contracts Jacob had long coveted, but failed to secure the new city library, a marvel of sustainable design. A community arts center for underprivileged youth, a pediatric hospital wing designed to feel more like a magical forest than a medical facility. They were projects with soul. Laurie's personal life underwent a similar deliberate reconstruction. The Georgetown house was cleansed of Bianca's gaudy influence. The metallic wallpaper was stripped away, the abstract rugs were donated, and the ridiculous champagne fridge in the closet was removed. Slowly, she filled the spaces not just with tasteful art and furniture, but with life. Laughter became a common sound in the hallways, usually courtesy of her sister Sophie. Friends gathered for casual dinners in the kitchen, their conversations flowing easily, without the oppressive weight of Jacob's ego sucking the air out of the room. The house, once a cold monument to a man's ambition, was finally a home. She rarely thought of Jacob. Then one afternoon, while walking back from a lunch meeting, she saw him. He was standing at a bus stop, hunched inside a thin, ill-fitting coat. He looked older, smaller, and utterly anonymous, just another face in the bustling crowd. He was staring up at the new headquarters of a rival firm, a building he had bitterly lost the bid for 2 years ago. There was no triumph in her heart, no surge of vindictive pleasure. There was only a profound and distant pity for a man who had flown so close to the sun on wings of his own making only to have them melt away, leaving him stranded back on Earth. He never saw her. She crossed the street and continued on her way, the encounter leaving no ripple in the calm surface of her new life. Later that week, she was standing on the balcony of her office, the one that had once been Jacob's. She looked out at the sprawling city, a complex tapestry of steel glass and human endeavor. She traced the lines of the buildings her firm was now creating, feeling a quiet sense of pride that was deeper and more satisfying than any victory. The glass door slid open, and Frank Gerber joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "The schematics for the library are coming along beautifully," he said, handing her a cup. "The City Council loves the green roof concept. They said it's the most innovative proposal they've seen in a decade. It was a brilliant touch from that new graduate, Maria, wasn't it?" Laurie smiled. "I knew they'd love it." Frank leaned against the railing, gazing out at the skyline with her. "You have good instincts, Laurie. You know I worked with Jacob for 25 years. He was a talented architect, a visionary in some ways, but he was always building monuments to himself. Every building was a testament to his genius. You're different. You're building a legacy, something that will stand for more than just a name." Laurie watched a plane silently cross the sky. She thought of the old leather-bound contract, the little piece of paper that had sat dormant for 2 decades. It was not a weapon she had forged for revenge. It was a shield, a promise she had made to her younger self and to the memory of her pragmatic father that she would never allow her contribution to be erased, that she would never be rendered powerless. Jacob had been the architect of their life together, but he had forgotten the most fundamental rule of his own profession. A structure, no matter how grand its design, is only as strong and enduring as its foundation, and the foundation had always quietly and steadfastly been hers. Laurie's story serves as a powerful real-life reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most observant and prepared. Jacob saw his wife as a relic of his past, someone to be discarded, completely underestimating the steel spine beneath her elegant composure. He was so blinded by his own ego and his mistress's flashy allure that he never considered she had a plan of her own, a masterfully crafted safety net that became an inescapable trap. This story is about more than just infidelity. It's about the devastating consequences of arrogance and the quiet, unyielding power of foresight. What did you think of Laurie's long game? Was her secret contract a stroke of genius or a cold, calculated move? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story of justice and vindication as compelling as we did, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good story, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas. Your support helps us bring these incredible tales to you every week.